I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and it is not Sabbath. It is in fact Monday, like it usually is when I'm sat here. It's Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. First on the docket, if you're seeing this episode, it means we somehow got the new Dolls Pod recorded, and this is our memorial episode for the one and only Marianne Faithfull. Where do I begin about Marianne? Singer and muse to the greats, sure. Actress, obviously, but I think of her as an artist, a poet, a performer, so dedicated to the craft through her whole life, and after getting knocked down so many times, she always managed to get back up again. That is tenacity and resilience. Marianne was an incredible woman. I know how much she means to Emma. She poured so much of her admiration and love into this episode, and I hope you guys love it too. The Dolls Pod is available wherever you stream your podcasts, but as always, Apple and Spotify are linked in my description. On to the next. So this is really the only room in my space I'm allowed to paint on and hang things on. As you've probably seen in my B-roll and on my Instagram, I have injected this room with as much color as possible. I went wild in here. And this week's album is actually inspired by some art I got for this space. Collections clearly picked up on how much of a color fiend I am because they sent along this beautiful blacklight-inspired Black Sabbath print by artist Gary Pullen. Collections isn't flimsy posters. These are high-quality, hand-numbered prints like the ones I used to make. Having been an artist myself, I have a real appreciation for the practice of printmaking. The designs these artists have contributed to collections are gorgeous. If you're not into neons and psychedelic shit like me, don't worry. They have the same prints in black and gold. Of course, they sent me along some Beatles prints as well. This is me we're talking about here. If you want to pick up some prints for yourself, collections will be linked in my description. I get no kickback from this. I just wanted to show my appreciation for their beautiful work. Thank you so much. I'm running out of wall space. This week's album is Black Sabbath, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my posts tab. That's where I post my hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website. Linked in the description. Everything's in the description. All right, housekeeping over. Let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress. This is just the general market repress from Rhino Records, and it's kind of perfect that this episode is inspired by wall art because the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath art is by a poster artist. The illustrations on the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath art are by Drew Struzan, known for his movie posters. E.T., the original Blade Runner, he did art for Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Alice Cooper fans might know him from the Welcome to My Nightmare art. At this point in his career, Drew was at the Pacific Eye and Ear workshop. Sabbath likely heard of Drew through their time in LA and commissioned him for some truly wild art. Joel McIver in The Complete History of Black Sabbath called it, quote, wonderfully psychedelic. I'm not so sure. The front cover is a man pinned down to the bed by 6 demons and death itself lurking over him. According to Ozzy, the demons are actually this man at various stages in his life. Quote, he's a man of greed, a man who's wanted everything all his life and done all this evil stuff. Clearly, Sabbath were leaning into the satanic image ascribed to them by puritanical, pearl-clutching middle America. Note the 666 carved into the bed frame. You know what this composition reminds me of? Baroque art. Renaissance art wait, hold on. I actually have a really great example for this. Renaissance art, like this tiny Michelangelo, feels balanced because so much of it is triangular. Baroque art feels imbalanced because it's either an inverted triangle, sorry JC, or a square. We have this dramatic shading, dynamic poses. Look at how the feet claw into these orbs. All hallmarks of Baroque. On the back cover, Renaissance. Look at that triangle. We can deduce this man is going to heaven. He's passing peacefully, surrounded by his loved ones. Oh gosh, it's been a while since I read Narnia, but I think lions are an allegory for God or Jesus. Opening up the gatefold, we have photography by Shepard Sherbel. This is supposed to be an antique interior, but as Tony pointed out in his autobiography, the socket in the wall ruins the illusion. On Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, we have the classic era lineup of Black Sabbath, fronted by the man, the myth, the living, God willing, legend, Ozzy Osbourne. Tony Iommi plays guitar, piano, organ, synths on Killing Yourself to Live, flute, and bagpipes. Bagpipes! Okay, so with the way Tony talked about it in his book, I'm actually not sure if the bagpipes made it onto Spiral Architect. If they did, I can't hear them, but if you hear them, by all means comment about it. Geezer Butler plays bass, synths, and mellotron on Who Are You? Not that one. And noise. Just noise. And of course, Bill Ward on drums. Our special guest is Rick Wakeman of Yes. He plays keys on Sabracadabra and maybe plays on Who Are You? The Phantom Fiddlers contribute strings to Spiral Architect. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was produced by Black Sabbath with help from Mike Butcher, arrangements by Will Malone and Rick Wakeman, direction by Patrick Meehan, whatever that means. Roll transition. It has been an insane few years for Black Sabbath. They broke through to the mainstream, sure, but for Sabbath specifically, I prefer to call it breach and containment. If you look at their DNA, 4 guys from Birmingham who learned how to be a band as they went along and sang honest observations of a chaotic decade, Sabbath was never supposed to be the band for the average teenager with beer bottles rolling around the floor of their hand-me-down pickup. Nevertheless, that's what happened. 2 foundational heavy metal albums in a row is no small feat. Then came Volume 4, the first time Sabbath were afforded much of any of a budget. Bill Ward said, quote, "By this time we were allowing more things to come into the music. Some strings, some brass band. We were moving toward different places. They had some weight to throw around. Patrick Meehan snagged them a big bucks deal with Warner Records. And they had the funds to partake in winter sports. So much snow. So much snow. So much so, they named a song Snowblind, and thanked it in their liner notes. Icicles in our brains indeed. Plain and simple, the guys were overdoing it. Ozzy is out of commission for a month when a flu turned into sepsis. As a result, they have to cancel the hotly anticipated tour to support Volume 4. The plan after that was to release a live album, but Meehan deemed the tapes unusable. After Tony takes this downtime to marry his girl, Bonzo was his best man and just about flipped his shit when he learned there would be no alcohol at the reception. Sabbath moved back to the Bel Air mansion where they wrote Volume 4. They booked time at the record plant in LA and got absolutely nothing. The guys were too busy partying and boozing it up to write. While the reputation of doing every drug under the sun has stuck to Ozzy, it seems to have rolled off the other 3 in the past decades. In reality, everyone was in dire straits. Bill admits he was addicted and a full-blown alcoholic to cope with the breakdown of his marriage. Geezer partook too. Tony skied so hard he collapsed just off stage after their Hollywood Bowl gig. Then he got writer's block. Not great for the primary songwriter. Quote, "Everybody was sitting there just waiting for me to come up with something. I just couldn't think of anything. And if I didn't come up with anything, nobody would do anything." In hopes of getting the creative juices flowing again, Sabbath took a page out of Zeppelin's book and hauled out to the countryside. But instead of some idyllic manor with a vegetable garden and a black dog, Sabbath stayed in a castle. They booked Clearwell Castle in Gloucestershire, restored to its former glory by Frank Yates in the 1950s. Just before Frank's death in 1973, he'd installed a recording studio. In the dungeon, no less! Perfect for Sabbath. Oh, and by the way,
Clearwell is rumored to be haunted.
It's unclear how much of the myth came from the owners of the castle fucking with the guys, or the guys fucking with each other, or the guys just getting
way too stoned.
But they all have their own ghost stories. Meanwhile, Ozzy is just being Ozzy. He falls asleep in front of the fireplace and is lit on fire by a stray ash. I'm quoting Paul Wilkinson on this because I truly could not phrase it any better, and I quote, Osborne flambe. These pranks, practical jokes, and mishaps got so out of hand that by the end of their stay, they were all sleeping on the floor of the same room. Oh my god, Black Sabbath sleepover. I'll totally bring the Ouija board. You know those days where just everything you say is the funniest thing you've ever heard? Clearly I'm having one of those days. And I'm really not sorry that you have to deal with that. In spite of, or maybe because of, this rumored paranormal activity, the juices did in fact get flowing again. Sabbath soon booked time at Rockfield Studios in Wales. Geezer said, quote, "We were in a terrible slump. We were all exhausted from touring. We weren't getting on very well. Then Tony came up with the riff for Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and everybody sparked to life." It was reportedly Bill who titled the song Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, in part a reference to John Schleisinger's Sunday, Bloody Sunday, in part a reference to a 1971 Alan Jones headline in The Melody Maker, which read, "Bloody Hell, Bloody Sabbath." However, I have to put a pin in this myth now. Alan Jones didn't start at Melody Maker until 1974, after Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was released. To tell you guys the truth, I can't find any evidence of this headline in Melody Maker, but never mind the name. By all accounts, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the song, kicked down a jammed door. Tony said, quote, "It was a heavy riff. Then the song went into a light bit in the middle, and then back to the riff again. The light and the shade I'm always looking for. Everything else came naturally." Fluff's title is a nod to BBC radio DJ Alan Freeman, the only DJ at BBC actually giving Sabbath a chance. As the story goes, Alan wore this fluffy sweater his mom knit for him to work one day and got mercilessly mocked for it. The guys decided to produce themselves. Ozzy said, quote, "I don't understand how anyone can listen to my music and put it down. Tell me how our music should sound when he hasn't been with the band for more than a day or so." And when it came time to work out arrangements, they called up their old drinking buddy, Rick Wakeman. No, really. Tony paid him in beer. Nowadays, we see Rick as one of the guys from Yes, but when you examine his personality, quote, "committed drinker, hellraiser, and meat-eater," Rick felt right at home with other committed drinkers and hellraisers. When it was time to write keys arrangements and figure out how to use the Moog Ozzy bought on a whim a few months back, Sabbath knew exactly who to call. This experimenting with synths possibly came from Stevie Wonder occupying the record plant just before Sabbath's original stint. After all is said and done, with Bel Air and the Castle and actually recording the thing, Bloody Sabbath took 8 months longer than expected to make. But hey, it's Sabbath in the early 70s. They can do whatever the fuck they want. On what made them try strings and bagpipes on Spiral Architect, Ozzy said, quote, "Well, fuck it. We'll try everything. We'll try anything and everything." The track listing of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have the title track, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, followed by a National Acrobat, then Fluff, and side 1 closes with Sabra Cadabra. Opening up side 2, we have Killing Yourself to Live, followed by Who Are You, then Looking for Today, and the album closes with Spiral Architect. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was either released in very late November or early December 1973, just in time for the holiday season. The title track became the single with changes off Volume 4 as the B-side, and something remarkable happened. Critics actually liked it. Fucking hell. When have you guys ever said anything good about us? Gordon Fletcher for Rolling Stone did, for starters. Quote, "Many will no doubt laugh, but but I can think of no other group that has so consistently spoken in the musical language of its times. The power chord, that brief but brutal third-generation staple, has always been Sabbath's major medium, the oral twin of the metallic age surrounding us. He praised Sabbath for becoming comfortable with the generational spokesman title, capitalizing on what they did best while incorporating daring new sounds. It, quote, transcends third-generation rock in that it possesses a degree of internal intricacy that belies popular conceptions of heavy metal. Others declared Sabbath had sold out, indulging in the same big-budget shenanigans as Dinosaurs, the Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin. I couldn't find Cream's review of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in the April 1974 issue. This is sadly an incomplete issue in their archives, but I did find the profile in the July 1974 issue, and it is incredible. It complains more about 45-cent hot dogs. That guy would have a heart attack if he walked into a Costco, than complaining about Sabbath's lack of lyrical prowess. I look at pieces like these and wonder how the hell they got published. In 1974, Ozzy said Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was his favorite album the guys made to date. In his inimitable rambling style, quote, "You never just sort of sit down and say, well, we'll put it in this way. We just sort of sit down and it just happens. It's just born, you know? I think this last album, I seriously have in my notes, insert stuttering here, is the best one we've ever done." Steve had a really positive experience interviewing Ozzy. He was just a teenager at the time, but the guys treated him really well. They sent a stretch limo, trashed his hotel room, lit the couch on fire as sort of an initiation, and foot the bill. In that very interview, Ozzy also confirmed he was considering going solo. To promote Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the guys kicked off another European tour and hit the States again, where they played one of their most iconic gigs, the Ontario Raceway, aka Cal Jam. It is wild seeing Black Sabbath play Children of the Grave on a stage with a big rainbow in back, and the Prince of fucking Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, flapping about in what looks to be a number he borrowed from Rick. The bill was a who's who of rock and roll in the 70s. ELP, Earth, Wind and Fire, a little country rock group called the Eagles. I'm scared if I even mention them I will get demonetized. Whoever Black Oak, Arkansas were, they were there too. Quote, "It was like, what, Black Oak, Arkansas? Oh dear, not again." Sabbath low-key forgot they were booked for this. They sent their booking agent out to confirm that yes, the festival is real, and yes, you will get sued if you don't show. They stayed up all night shredding the slopes with Deep Purple. No wonder every number was in double time. 1974 was a shit show on the world stage. Nixon was on track to be impeached before he resigned. He's replaced by Gerald Ford, who has the gall to pardon him.
How the hell could you pardon Nixon?
Fuel crises in both America and Britain. Britain is experiencing political turmoil in 1974, more than usual. They have 2 general elections in 8 months after their government folds, and the IRA bombed Parliament. 1974 was a shit show for Sabbath too. They're on another brief tour before, surprise, here come the lawsuits. Remember when they fired their old manager Jim Simpson? Yeah, I don't remember that either. Anyway, that happened like 4 years ago, and only now Jim is suing. The ensuing 8-month court case rigmarole effectively forced Sabbath out of touring until the next year. For those of you who don't know, bands actually make most of their money on touring. This was a huge loss for Sabbath. Then, Sabbath broke things off with manager Patrick Meehan. Remember Cal Jam? The guys were paid $1,000 each for playing. Not too shabby, especially when you adjust that for modern inflation. But when you learn Sabbath were supposed to be paid $250,000, and after calculating the money left over after taxes, insurance, paying the roadies, fees, and travel, the remaining $150,000 had just gone missing, it quickly becomes shabby. Turns out Patrick had been skimming off the guy's royalties too, a mondo conflict of interest seeing as his dad was the exec of the Warner subsidiary that Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was exclusively released on. And after all of this was said and done, Sabbath had to pay him for wrongful termination. Geezer said, quote, "It was horrible. we had to pay him off. The way he had us tied up in his contracts, we had to pay him to get away from him. We didn't have lawyers or anything when we signed the contracts because we didn't know. Geezer was right. They didn't know just how deep of shit they were in. Patrick took everything Sabbath had with him. And I mean everything. He somehow owned the guys' houses. All of this legal nonsense effectively forced Sabbath into hiatus and made Bloody Sabbath an even tougher act to follow. The stress no doubt triggered Ozzy's descent into drug-fueled chicken-shooting madness. Man, what is it with this guy and winged animals? Sabbath did eventually sign with Don Arden. Ozzy took a liking to Don's daughter Sharon. The rest is beer-thieving reality TV history.
Someone has been in my room and taken my beers away from my room.
I don't think so, darling.
Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is remembered as one of Sabbath's greatest achievements, bookending the classic period that began with their self-titled record. Ozzy called it, quote, "our last truly great album, I think. With the music, we'd managed to strike just the right balance between our old heaviness and our new experimental side." Tony added, "Even today, I find that the music compared to the previous records has more class about it, more arrangements, more shine if you like, and it's more adventurous." It was a leap forward. We used strings and God knows what else. We really expanded. That's why, for me, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath was the pinnacle. So, what do I think of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath? It's that time of year again, or they're doing flight exercises over my house. Maybe that's why the rent's so cheap here. Going in. It has been a minute since I last covered Sabbath. October of 2023, a week before ABH. That's ancient history as far as this channel is concerned. It's an unfortunate symptom of how this series runs. It's months, sometimes years before I cycle back to any one group. And it certainly doesn't help that I've been holding off on Sabbath for a first 4 albums mega episode. It left me at an interesting point to jump back in, where Lester Bang's Praise Be did not ever get Sabbath. I do, especially this weird period of Volume 4, my personal favorite Sabbath album, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage, my second favorite. I don't know, if I've been goofy in this episode, it's because these guys are just a pleasure to write about. They make me feel like a real rock writer. After 3 albums of grinding, working their ass off, spitting out entire records in one 16-hour session or something stupid like that, they'd finally earned the budget. And on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, they were having some fun with it. Heavy metal, that amorphous thing, it gets a bad rep for being simplistic and crude. Heavy metal is far from dumb. When you wade into the theory of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath songs, we find some really musically complex stuff. Paul Wilkinson goes into amazing detail in his book Rat Salad. This was my personal favorite book I read for this episode. Most any music theory specific observations will come from that text. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is anchored by one of the most gripping, arresting riffs in rock history. Imagine buying this album in 1973, bringing it home to your turntable, and dropping the needle for the first time on this. Imagine having to hide this art from your parents. The detuned C is gnarly, menacing, and this guitar tone is searing hot. It's a far departure from the earthier, muddy tones of Paranoid and Master of Reality. This tone is sharp and glossy, like giant shoots of glass jutting up from the ground. The 80s took this sound and ran with it. The mud comes in at the harmony line. Typically a guitarist would play that with a sharper tone, but Tony inverts it. So the gloss goes under the bass coat instead of over it. There's more of an edge added with the crunchy recording fidelity, especially on Tony's transcendent solo. Of course, the lyrics are the existential doom we've come to expect from these guys. The race is run, the book is read, the end begins to show. It's oddly prophetic considering the band's subsequent fall from grace after this album. The truth is out, the lies are told, but you don't want to know. Like any respectable rock group in the 70s, Sabbath were flogged by critics. This title track allegedly lashes out at one critic in particular. Ozzy refused to name them in an interview in 1983, and they haven't been named since. If this is true, I say if, because this interpretation really hangs on if the Bloody Hell, Bloody Sabbath headline actually existed, this guy faces a similar punishment to the War Pigs. There's even a nod to the Paranoid album in the lyrics. You're wishing that the hands of doom could take your mind away. If there's anything to take from Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, it's expect the unexpected. Sabbath were always ones to muck with song structure. See them making a riff, a chorus, sticking multiple refrains in, 2 bridges, and a galloping outro with these whirring, howling solos. It's quite inspired to put bongos in a metal tune. I don't think anyone has the bravery to do that nowadays. And the full-bodied acoustic refrains with almost jazzy licks by Tony and Geezer are something truly unexpected. A smile spread across my face when I heard that. Wrong album! Also unexpected is Ozzy's refrain from his usual practice of ending every stanza with "yeah!" Oh, no, wait, there's one. Steve Rosen described Ozzy as, quote, an untrained singer who made up for a lack of natural talent with a truckload of determination. You need determination to muscle through Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Ozzy tackles this hellish key to sing on. I do not envy him on that key change. While Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath is a scathing call-out, A National Acrobat is... well, it is brave to wade into the philosophical and, unfortunately, political question of where life actually begins. Sabbath turns the puritanical "life begins at conception" idea on its head, presenting an alternative. What if we're all wrong and death begins at conception? Are we all born doomed? What's fascinating to me about Sabbath is that for how lauded their lyrics are for commenting on the state of modern society, Ozzy said that he didn't really pay attention to the news. The guys just called it as they saw it. It is some seriously existential shit, especially when the song takes the point of view of... I cannot believe I am saying this. The point of view of the swimmer who was too slow. The deathly darkness that belies the fate of those who never ran. Ozzy clearly sees the humor in all this. Check that. He has never half-assed a vocal performance once. The lyrics don't fully explore this philosophical conundrum, and I don't expect them to. But man, is it cool. Count on Geezer Butler to be accidentally profound. He sneaks reincarnation into the final verse. Here I wait and only guess what this next life will bring. Sabbath were quite fond of these moral songs. If they weren't so cool, it might come off preachy. The overall moral of the song is... you made it there first, so cherish the life you were given. The sharp lead guitar and muddy harmony form melodic thirds, another trait 80s metal took and ran with. It's quite interesting to discover that Acrobat is in Dorian mode. Do not get freaked out by that. Purple Haze, Scarborough Fair, and Eleanor Rigby. All in Dorian too. Let me preface this by saying I am the Sabbath instrumental interlude defender. I tolerate Rat Salad. I love Embryo. Any opportunity for the sidemen to flex their abilities, especially multi-instrumentalist Tony, is welcome here. That being said, fluff is a little too much fluff for me. Paul Wilkinson goes to bat for it, and I see why. Musically, it's good. It's lush, it's pretty, but interludes are first and foremost meant to serve the tone of the rest of the LP. And tonally, fluff is a little precious to suit the other material here. This would work better for, say, Graham Nash to be singing over in 1969 instead of Black Sabbath in 1973. Especially the harpsichord. Oh my god, that is so dated by 1973. Again, expect the unexpected from Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Side 1 rounds out with Sabracadabra, a song that tips its deranged magician's top hat to their roots. Equally unexpected, and I Love My Lady, She's So Fine I Want Her All the Time song. You know she makes me feel alright, someone to hold me, love me every single day. If you wrote down these lyrics, handed them to an unsuspecting boomer, and asked them, Is this a Zeppelin song, or is this a Sabbath song? 9 times out of 10, they'd pick Zeppelin. Dare I say Sabracadabra is trampled underfoot's evil older sister. Though Sabbath were loose in their drop tune sound, the chemistry was tight. Sabra is almost progressive? Not prog. Oh my god, the only remotely prog thing is Rick Wakeman just being here. But it is progressive. It introduces new motifs like the deliciously slow arpeggiated middle section. It cycles through familiar motifs again and blends them both. Note how Rick's piano is brought into the crushing fold. Pay attention to what Geezer does, especially through the last movement. He moves the song more than you think he would. I do have one critique about this song's recording fidelity. It sounds super thin, almost anemic in the beginning. Well, I noticed this when I played this song on a loop, just because I was feeling it so much, and I'm like, wow, the beginning is really thin sounding compared to the end. I'll be frank, I do not enjoy side 2 of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath as much as I enjoy side 1. Sometimes when a band has too much at their disposal and too big a budget to play with, they can lose focus. That's what happens with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. It loses focus. But it does start off strong with one of my favorites on the LP, Killing Yourself to Live. It's got more tonic-based riffs, it's in C-sharp tuning again too. National Acrobat used it, I think the title track used it as well. This feels a lot brighter, even for being a song about literally working yourself to death. From my notes, ooh, I like this watery tone. According to Rat Salad, Killing Yourself to Live inspired Come As You Are. I don't call this tone watery for the Nevermind cover, I call it so for its loose viscosity. I know in the 60s you got this sound with an Octavia pedal, technology would have far advanced by 1973. We're branching out from the earthy tones, but instead of going super glossy and hot, it's watery and cool. Killing Yourself to Live is my favorite Bill Ward performance until holy sh*, Tony swoops in with like 3 tracks totally stealing his thunder. There's this scratchy line buried in there. Once again, hello 80s. But since it's buried in all this stuff, it doesn't sound nearly as grating as it would be in the next decade. When Tony zeroes in on Ozzy's melody, very rare for a Sabbath song to do, on You Think That I'm Crazy and Baby I Know That It's True, I just want that to happen like 5 more times. For how untrained Ozzy supposedly was, he had a great ear for melody. Eventually, the guys let Bill shine again, carrying this song off on a manic gallop, with crushing rolls and big booming kicks bolstered by Geezer. Who Are You was written primarily by Ozzy, which busts the myth that he supposedly split from Sabbath because their music was getting too weird. I am not a fan of this song at all. The Moog is grating, ill-suited for the Sabbath sound, it dates the record. Synths fit much better in Killing Yourself to Live when they were more subtle and not the focus of the whole song. After my first couple listens through Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I started to skip Who Are You. Looking for Today is dizzying, and I'm not sure if it's in a good or a bad way. It makes some crazy choices production-wise, shoving Bill's drums all the way in the left and right channels. I like the echoing, almost cello-like accents. There's flute for like 15 seconds. If you played either of the 2 main riffs on a Rickenbacker, they get scary close to Daydripper. Will it Beatles? Yes, it will. That's gotta be helped out by the song once again being in Dorian mode. Overall, this is an enthusiastic performance by Sabbath. Man, this song is jarring. I just can't get a read on it. As for this album's closer, Spiral Architect, I started out not liking it at all. I don't know, it's taken about a week and a half to write this episode, and in that time I've gone from totally hating it to liking it. Probably by the time this video is up in, God, not the last week of March, third week of March. By then, I'll probably love it. I'll sprinkle my admiration in the comments. I won't ever deride the string arrangement. It swirls so gorgeously among such rock-solid elements. The acoustic guitar intro is gorgeous. I love that Sabbath were getting more comfortable with that at this phase in their career. The triumphant, oddly bright central motif is something I might associate with Rush instead of Sabbath. This sounds a lot like, say, the Limelight days. Having a look at Spiral Architect's lyrics, you can tell that Sabbath were rubbing shoulders with prog guys. We are getting medieval, sorcerers of madness, superstitious century, whatever a synchronated Undertaker is, and sci-fi. Superman, and plasmic oceans in disguise. It's like a Roger Dean come to life, but because it's Sabbath, all the colors are mirrored, so the greens and blues have become hellish reds and oranges. Honestly, I think it might be the lyrics that turn me off from Spiral Architect. I wish they weren't quite so vague and empty. Nothing burgers are very atypical for Sabbath, who always had something to say. It leaves a lot to be desired, especially when you consider the closer of the previous album, Under the Sun. The audience clapping and fade out isn't a good look either. Sometimes you can tell when a band produces themselves. Just give themselves a nice little pat on the back. You people are going to light your torches over this, but I see parallels between Sabbath and Houses of the Holy. Both groups had something to prove. By album number 5, they'd proved it. The battle was won. They could have fun now. They could get a little weird with it. For both, album number 5 was the tipping point between the classic era, 4 undisputable albums, and something else. What was Sabbath's something else? Were they gonna regress back to the gritty, earthy, paranoid Master of Reality sound? Were they gonna keep in the Volume 4 direction? Or were they gonna do something completely different? I'm fond of Bloody Sabbath for its natural continuation of the Volume 4 path. It would have been very easy for them to make War Pigs and Iron Men for the rest of their career, but no, Sabbath kept experimenting. However, instead of digging the crypt deeper from Volume 4, that record is dark and lead-heavy, especially for its time. Bloody Sabbath pushed the crypt walls out, polished sounds up, indulged in the zany, even lit a few torches. Is it a cop-out to say I mostly enjoy Sabbath Bloody Sabbath as a companion piece? Maybe so. You gotta give it to Sabbath. They had the balls to do this album. Not all their creative choices land, but this is a confidence they couldn't have had 4 short albums ago. Because this assertion of mastery, worthiness, even assertion of morality at some point in their lyrics, comes from honing your craft and putting in the work to do so. I have always respected working class bands more for this principle because I can sense that work ethic and I respect the hell out of it. I guess you could say this album works hard and plays hard. Overall, when I consider how high and hot to the touch its high points really are, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is a worthy answer to the LP5 conundrum. Bloody hell, Bloody Sabbath indeed. My personal favorites off this one are Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, National Architect, Sabracadabra, and Killing Yourself to Live. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week, and I almost forgot how to say that, even though I literally say it every week. And that's it! That was Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. This was such a fun album to write about. Sabbath are always such a fun group to write about, and I really needed that fun after last week, as you're seeing this, was so heavy for me. But what do you think of this album? What do you think of Black Sabbath? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet has to say, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of the Dolls podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye! Gotta put on my glasses because these lights are so bright. Oof, that was cheese.